for another edition of Holiday Storytime 2021. Now, so far we have read about Fancy Nancy and how she gets ready for Christmas and how splendiferous that is. And then last week we read a story about Santa's beard and how weird Santa would look if he didn't have his beard, what he would try to do to try and replace his beard. But this time we are going to read a very super famous, amazing classic. This might be the most famous Christmas story of all time if we take out definitely The Night Before Christmas, which we actually read last year, and I will probably repost that one before Christmas time so you guys can watch it again if you want to. And maybe Rudolph. Rudolph might be slightly more famous than this one. I don't know. You guys come to the library and tell me if you think that Rudolph is more famous or less famous than the Grinch Who Stole Christmas. So we're going to read this one this week, but we're going to build on some of the skills that we learned last week when we were talking about the rhyming, because nobody, and I mean nobody, rhymes like Dr. Seuss, right? And this book, once you read this book, you really start finding rhyming stuff all of the time. If you read it out loud, grown-ups if you read it out loud to kids, or kids if you read it out loud, I think for sure you will start rhyming everything, because that's what Dr. Seuss does to your brain. It's like he rewires it. Now, when we read this story this week, we are going to throw the rhyming words actually up on the screen so that we don't have to stop so many times. But we are going to read through the first couple pages together before I switch this over to our YouTube channel where I can read the whole story, so that we can get into the groove of rhyming. And then when over on the YouTube channel, Miss Ann is going to read this story straight through without really any stopping to talk about the rhyming or much of the story. Couple of comments, because she just can't. But for the most part, we are going to read this story straight through when we read it on the YouTube channel. Before we get into the story, before we get into talking about the rhyming and all the fun stuff, let's quickly talk about what it is when you feel bad about something, right? Everyone else is really excited about something and you don't want to do it. Maybe you have a really good reason, like you were scared or you're annoyed, or I think with the Grinch really is that he feels really lonely. Who's all have a lot of family. You guys know the story. Grinch is sad, I think, because he doesn't have anybody to spend Christmas with. And that's really hard. And I think it's important to think about the reasons why somebody doesn't like something. Do they have a good reason, or do they not have a good reason? I won't drink out of this cup because it's pink. That's not an excellent reason why. If it's just because you don't like the color, I don't think that's the most important reason why not to do something. You don't want to go ice skating with your family because you're really, 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 really scared to fall down and hurt yourself. Or you're really, really, really scared to look like you don't know how to do something, which is a scary thing to a lot of people too. That's where we go anyway. We tell why we don't want to do something. We don't just say, I don't want to do it and stop talking. We tell somebody. Like the Grinch could have solved all of these problems that he has in this book if he had just told somebody that he was unhappy. Talking the story, but that's okay. At the end, the Who's are like, come spend Christmas with us. And then he's a happy Grinch. Not a sad, mean Grinch who hates Christmas anymore. Now he's a happy Grinch. And if the Grinch had just said something before he got into such a nutty state where he wanted to steal Christmas, we could have been all having a nice Christmas day together instead of going through all of this drama. But then we wouldn't have a story. But for you guys, tell why you don't want to do something. You are too tired to go to this Christmas party. Maybe you should say that instead of saying, I don't want to go. Or I don't know anybody there and I'm nervous. Tell people, don't just say no and then wreck it for everybody. Don't be a Grinch. Tell a grown-up why you're not happy. Let's go on with talking about the other important parts of How a Grinch Stole Christmas. The best ever reading of How the Grinch Stole Christmas was done in the cartoon version. So if you guys have a chance to watch that this season, I highly recommend it because you really get the emotion of the Grinch, I think. And you get that deep, deep voice that Miss Ann just doesn't have. But this together, we will be concentrating on the story and the rhyming. And we are also lucky that we're going to do this as a virtual story because Miss Ann will never, never, ever do this in person because this is too long of a story to read in story time or if I was doing a holiday celebration because it is really long. These are serious business and they're long stories and you have to get every word right. So that's why we're going to do this virtually as a special treat, but I don't know, this might be the only time you'll ever see Miss Ann read How the Grinch Stole Christmas. So let's get into the rhyming part of it first off. We all know how this story starts, right? Every who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. So you can see the rhyming words that we threw up on the screen there were a lot and not. A, lot, and n-ot. A lot, not. They rhyme at the end. And you can see it too when you flow through it. So we're going to do it again for the rest of this page and then we'll switch over. So the Grinch hated Christmas the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. Season, reason, season, reason. Christmas season knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight. On just right, were too tight. Right, tight, right, tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been his heart was 2 sizes too small. Reason of all, sizes too small. All, small, all small. Okay, you get where we're going? Are you guys ready? We're gonna dive right in. How the Grinch Stole Christmas. It's by Dr. Seuss, you guys, if you didn't already know. Every who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas the whole Christmas season. Now please, don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all might have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Who's, staring down from his cave with a sour, Grinchy frown at the warm lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas, it's practically here. Then he growled with his Grinch fingers, nervously drumming. I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early. They'd rush for their toys, and then, oh, the noise. Oh, the noise, 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 noise. That's the one thing he hated. The noise, 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 noise. Sometimes noises are bugging you. And wouldn't you do anything to make them stop? Maybe. Then the Who's, young and old, would sit down to a feast. And they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, 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 feast. They would feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. Okay, I'm sorry, interrupting again. But maybe the Grinch was a vegetarian or a vegan and he couldn't eat roast beast. So maybe, again, say something if you can't eat anything at the feast and they'll probably make you something else. And then they do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand and the Who's would start singing. They'd sing and they'd sing and they'd sing, 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 sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years, I've put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I love this picture. He's so happy about his wonderful, awful idea. I said before that we should feel bad for the Grinch, but he is kind of mean and a little bit nutty. Doesn't mean we shouldn't feel bad for him, but he's really happy about his terrible idea to make other people unhappy, which I don't really love that. I know just what to do. The Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat. And he chuckled and clucked. What a great Grinchy trick! With this coat and this hat, I'll look just like Saint Nick. Saint Nick is another word for Santa Claus, if you didn't know. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around. But since reindeer are scarce, there were none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max. Then he took some red thread and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Poor Max. Max does not look at all into this. Then he loaded some bags and some empty old sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, "Giddy up!" And the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Who's lay a snooze in their towns. All their windows were dark. Quiet snow filled the air. All the Who's were all dreaming sweet dreams without care. When he came to the first little house on the square, "This is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed, and he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch. But if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once, for a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little Who stockings all hung in a row. "These stockings," he grinned, "are the first thing to go." And he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant around the whole room, and he took every present. pop guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorns, and plums. And he stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch, very nimbly, stuffed all the bags, one by one, up the chimney. Then he slunk to the icebox, and he took the Who's feast. He took the Who's pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took the last can of Who hash. Obviously, you guys know the icebox is a refrigerator. I always thought Who pudding was gross when I was a kid, and I was like, what could that sounds... I don't want Who pudding. The Grinch can have that. But maybe it's something really good, like your favorite dessert, like maybe it's chocolate cake. Or maybe it's your favorite Christmas cookie, or whatever you like the best. I think they might call that pudding as well. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. And now, grinned the Grinch, I'll stuff up that tree. And the Grinch grabbed the tree and he started to shove, when he heard a small sound like a coo of a dove. He turned around fast and saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou Who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter, who'd got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, "Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?" One more thing. Grown-ups and older kids, do you know any 2-year-olds that would talk like that? Because they say Cindy Lou Who was no more than 2. I mean, maybe I've met 1 or 2, but most of my 2-year-olds can't say, "Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?" No. I think this was a rhyming crime where Dr. Seuss wanted to rhyme Who and 2. And he was like, yeah, she's 2. She can totally talk in full sentences. No, Dr. Seuss. I call rhyming foul on that one. That you did that just because 2 rhymes with Who. But you know, that old Grinch was so smart and so slick. He thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick. "Why, my sweet little tot," the fake Santa Claus lied, "there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side. So I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, and I'll bring it back here." And his fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then the last thing he took was the log for the fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. And on their walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire. And the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. It is truly a terrible thing to do. It doesn't matter how mad you are. Don't do this stuff. Don't make someone's day worse because you're having a bad day. Come on, you guys. Again, let's be better than the Grinch. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. Tipping his hat to that mouse, being like, "Ha, I took all your food." Yep, Grinch is pretty much a jerk. I mean, we can still be nice to jerks, but still. Jerk. It was 1/4 past dawn. All the Who's still abed. All the Who's still a snooze. That one's a good one. Who's and snooze. Sorry. When he packed up his sled, packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags, and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip top to dump it. Pooh, pooh, to the Who's, he was Grinchishly humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, boo-hoo! That's a noise, grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put a hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, this sound sounded merry, but it couldn't be so. But it was merry, very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. He saw was a shocking surprise. He looks really surprised. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. Then he puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. The end. Which I feel is a pretty abrupt ending. I always forget that this goes like so super quick at the end, that he changed his mind. His heart grew. They let him carve the roast beast. The end. So I think they give you more time to like come to that conclusion in the cartoon. I think it like feels longer anyway. But that is the end of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And I hope you guys have thought about the rhyming, put all those words up there, and that you think too about not being so Grinchy, or trying to figure out the reasons why you feel Grinchy during this holiday time. Because sometimes it does get exhausting. We're tired. There's a lot of responsibilities for kids and grown-ups during this Christmas time season. You feel like being Grinchy. But remember, the Grinch is only the Grinch because you took it out on other people. Don't take your Grinchiness out on other people. Let's try to be more like Who's than like Grinches. All right. We'll see you next time. Next time is the story right before our before Christmas. So we might make that one a little bit short. All right, you guys. Hope you enjoyed this one. And we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.